we'll shoot with different techniques in a bunch of different ways, and that way, while the actor or the interviewee is talking about that certain location, we'll take that voice and we'll put it over top of a couple B-roll shots of that location. And for instance, a while back we were at, let's go with, an old black powder mill that we shot at last year. And I'll put my voice here over top of a shot of that location, and that way the audience gets to visualize it a little more than rather than just having me here talking about it and describing it in detail. It's a lot better just to see the location, and I'll explain that to my actors or interviewees beforehand, so they're not saying, on camera, well, the location was a lot like this, and this was over here, and this was over there. It doesn't make for a great movie, so I just say, tell people the location, maybe give a detail of where it's at while you're talking. That way I can find it later, and then I'll show a couple pictures of it. That way people can visualize themselves there in that story. If you edit while you're on the road, a great thing to do is to have a portable external hard drive. We have a Seagate 2 terabyte hard drive and a Toshiba 1 terabyte hard drive inside of here, and that's a My Passport 1 terabyte hard drive, and they both have the cabling all inside here. And this is an old graphics calculator case that protects our hard drives while we're on the road. We can take the cables out of it and zip it kind of back up again and protect the hard drives and just plug it in and be on the road editing in the passenger seat or something like that, or in the driver's seat, because that's fun too. But that's what we have, and while we're on production or something like that, we'll have this off to the side with a computer there. So basically you can have, rather than switching out SD cards and having like 50 SD cards, we'll just have like 2 or 3, and that way we can import the footage to one of these and these hard drives, and then switch them out, format the cards every time, shoot as much as we want, and at the end of the day just copy from these to our actual 4 terabyte external hard drive here at the office. So get yourself one of those. For most people doing live events, the audio is much more important, when in truth the visual aspect to any live event is weighted much heavier in the audience's mind than the auditory aspects will ever. So you can have great audio, but if you don't have great lighting, your audience will leave unsatisfied, and chances are they won't return. Now in filmmaking, this is completely different. This is only for live events. If you're on a week-long vacation, don't sit in your hotel room scanning through several hundred photos. Go to dinner and enjoy your time. If you missed a shot somehow, there's nothing you can do about it anyway, so wait until you're back home to look through the photos. I'm just as guilty of this as the next guy, because I'm always anxious to see what I captured, but if somehow I missed a shot or something wasn't in focus, it will start to ruin your mood, and in the end, ruin your trip. The photos you take will still be there when you get home, so enjoy yourself while you can. So share the camera among the family, and even let your kids take a photo or two here or there. I always say the best photos in the world aren't those which were captured by professional photographers who know what all the settings and buttons on the camera control. The best photos capture life in all of its breathtaking glory, so don't be afraid to let your kids take some photos. Sure, while some of the photos they might take might be of the dog sniffing his own behind, who knows, there might be a diamond in the rough that will take your breath away. Plus, if your kid ever becomes a photographer, you can always embarrass them by telling everyone what the first photo they took was of. Just because you wrote the song doesn't mean you need to produce it. The top record companies in the world have all come out and said they don't mind if the song is only recorded on a Zoom H4n or a similar device, and that it doesn't need to be a studio version, which costs you thousands as a songwriter. The record companies have to produce it with their artists anyway, so you producing it on your own does them no good and only costs you thousands. It won't be reimbursed. You always have things on set that just don't go according to plan. I've had, for a music video I did for Haunted, I planned on doing that so many different days, and it just kept on raining that season, and I was like, I need to get there. So, and what really is fortunate about it is, because a couple days after that I was like, it's raining, and then all of a sudden
they actually had a forest fire where we were going to shoot. I kid you not, there was a forest fire, and I was, at the same time of being like, oh, that's a really bad thing that happened, I found out about it the next day, and I go, well, that's going to look awesome on film, because we wanted this very burned look, and I was going to need to do all that in post-production anyway. And then I find out there's a forest fire there, and luckily everything was distinguished. Went there about a week later to film, and the thing looked beautiful for what we were trying to get. And I was really happy about it. I did not set the forest fire. I just want to put a disclaimer there. But it just worked out very luckily for us for what we wanted the scene to look like. You know, back when I worked for a major big box retail store, I started as a team member, and then I showed that, you know, I can definitely step up. I can take the leadership role. My managers allowed me, they didn't tell me what to do most times. And so I stepped up. I saw things that needed to be done. I did them. And so a week later, I was promoted to being a manager. So definitely stepping up and showing that you can do things beyond what you were hired to do, showcases to your management. Even if it's just a one-time gig, you can always show to them that, you know, you can take a more leadership role. And it's always good to show that you can do more.
It tells kind of the story of why I'm making it, and to preserve that history, and that won't be told in future generations. Because I think in history, you know, in generations to come, history books are going to skim over us and say, and generalize us by maybe a couple of different features, such as like terrorist attacks, or, you know, wars that we've been in, or maybe a couple of famous people who've done extraordinary things. But in general, it's not going to be, you know, telling the story of every single person. I think it's up to us to preserve that history. Because I think that history is important, especially for, you know, our children and grandchildren to look back at and say, you know, this was my family member. And I think when my kids grow up and they want to start learning about, you know, their great-great-grandparents, then I can show them a video and say, you know, this is who your grandparents were, and that's why, you know, we're getting 500 plus hours, not necessarily all of interviews, but I think in general they're going to be able to look back at that footage and say, this is who my family was, and get to see some of the personality of their ancestors. So that for me is worth it.
Never assume that your position isn't important, but always assume that everyone else's position is more important than yours, no matter who you are on set. Even if you're the director, assume everyone else's position is more important than your own, because then you'll appreciate every other position a little more. I freely admit, when I first started this industry, I was a kid, and I unfortunately learned what it's like to be on the road and what it's like to have this crazy lifestyle before I learned how to be humble. I learned in an opposite way of what you should. And so one crucial piece of advice I try to point out anytime I can is that you should learn how to be humble first. So learn all these other positions before you go on stage, before you get in front of a camera. Learn what it's like to be behind the camera. And that's where this little club did something incredible. They let one person this year who genuinely wanted to do something different than act on stage. They let them come behind the scenes and help out. Learn what it was like to be behind a lighting board or a soundboard and, you know, mic up an actor. They learned that stuff. And I think we as an industry have to allow that. We have to allow kids or people just starting out to learn those behind the scenes positions before they get in front of the camera, before they get on stage.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and see us back here next time for even more great video, lighting, audio, music, and photography tips and tricks. Click here to subscribe, here to watch another video, and here to catch up on Season 5 of the show.